we usually do is comment very quickly on the movie, but I think the movie is so beautiful and speaks for itself, and we've seen the other movies about damming and stuff. I'm guessing that most of you are here because of the Northern Pass project. Is that correct? Yes? Anybody who was just here for the interest of the movie and wasn't too... Okay. Interested in Northern Pass or the discussion of it as well? Okay. So, very brief.
Maybe some outdoor enthusiasts as well.
Oh yes, outdoor enthusiasts. Yes. Okay. Good. Great. Yes.
Maybe some lovers.
Oh yeah. We'll just
Labrador.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Nicolas, we'll just listen to you all night. That would be nice. No, but that's okay. But what we'll do is maybe each of you introduce yourselves because we have the co-sponsors here. That would be terrific. And just real quickly, a little blurb, but I know that, I'm guessing the audience is very anxious to ask questions. So, if you want to take it away, Will.
Thanks. This is the second time I've seen the movie, and I have to say, and I said this last week to Nicolas, that the one thing that the take-home message for me, and admittedly at the Forest Society and with our partners in the conservation organizations here in New Hampshire, we're kind of wrapped up in Northern Pass, but the real take-home message for me was, if we ask the right questions at the beginning, and we insist on thorough answers to those questions, we will arrive at a very different destination than we will if we don't. And it may or may not be too late for the Romaine River. It's not too late for the New Hampshire landscape.
Well, you said we should present ourselves. I'm an environmental educator. That's my first film. I wanted to make... we're often doing large-scale hydro projects in Quebec. I wanted to do a large-scale education project. So that was my goal, and I didn't want it to look too scholar. So the film speaks by itself. So I'm really interested in hearing you. Hearing you about your concerns and also your comments about the film and all the energy issues. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Christophe. I'm a staff attorney at the Conservation Law Foundation here in New Hampshire, and one of my primary jobs these days is advocacy on the Northern Pass project. And I think one of the reasons why CLF really wanted to bring this film to New Hampshire audiences, and so we have all these showings over an 8-day period and continuing next month in Keene, was that this is really the piece of the Northern Pass project which has not received public scrutiny. This project is about providing a new corridor for Hydro-Quebec to sell power from these new economically marginal, if not disastrous, environmentally damaging projects. That's not to say that all hydropower from Canada doesn't have a role in our energy system. There's already a lot of power coming down from Canada through an existing tie, which is larger than Northern Pass would be. But as Will alluded to, this is a big question for the state, whether to move forward with a project to bring more power from projects like the one that you've seen dramatized down to New England. It's more than half of our peak need in this state is the size of this project. It's a huge project. It's a big decision, and as Roy Dupuis said, it's not about answering the question for people. It's about making sure they have the information to make that decision for themselves. And that's really why we're advocating the way we are in this project. And So I really look forward to your questions, and thank you for coming out. And I think, thank you to Nicolas for providing us with this amazing window to a place that most of us have never been, and many of us will never get to. But that's the type of information that can help us understand these decisions in a different way, and what they really mean.
Right, it's not just about the power lines. So, thank you. Any last comments before we open it up, or? Yes? Okay, let's go. Okay, there we go.
I have a couple questions. D'abord for Nicolas. A lot of the people that were in the film seem to be about the same age, your age, age of my children. Did you all study at Laval? I noticed Laval and the professor was in there. Are you from?
Nobody studied at Laval. Even the professor of the university didn't study there.
Because he was preeminent in the...
I remember I saw his resume. He studied in London School of Economy, something like that. Now he teaches in Ottawa. Yeah. So nobody went to this university. I'm 36. The youngest you see in the film is Steve and Fran. They are now, because when we filmed, it's 3 years and a half ago. So I was 32 and a half, I think, 33. So I think they were 26, Fran and Steve. And they I guess it answers your question.
And the other question is, I noticed that as far as the northern pass around here, the holdouts are a lot of the dairy farmers. Are you letting them know about the methane and the conversion process?
Yeah,
because if somebody came to me and offered me $1 million or $2 for my property that was worth 1/10 of that, it would be a difficult personal decision to make. But to see that it was something that you could do to keep what the family has done and also profit on it, you know, maybe that's something that our legislators might need to hear. God forbid if we take out.
I think you said there's a Vermont farm?
Yeah, there's a Cow Power in Vermont, and they actually support Vermont Public Television. So if you have access to their station, you'll see their ads come on the Vermont Public Television.
Does
I
anybody
came
know of
originally
any?
from Montana, and a lot of cattle out in Montana.
Yeah.
But that hasn't really been terribly economically feasible, right? They've proven that they can do it, but the return on investment has not been marginal at best.
There's a big competition with the shale gas.
Yeah.
Methane is basically CH4. It's composed of carbon and hydrogen, and natural gas that comes from shale gas is also CH4. And since they discovered it in Pennsylvania, New York State, in some areas, they're drilling, they're polluting the underground water, but it provides them very cheap gas. So that's the main competitor. So as long as the shale gas won't be forbidden, and as long as there is shale gas, it's going to be difficult. They're going to have to give a higher price, and it's very clean, like methane. It deserves a very high price, because you're not only using renewable energy, you're reducing the greenhouse gas, because if you don't do it, the greenhouse gas will go in the atmosphere. The CH4 is 21 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than CO2. So you'd rather burn it.
Having grown up
and
in a small...
And also there's the odor. It smells. Those farms. When you do biogas, you catch 95% of the odor, and you produce energy. And also it's going to make compost. So you can put it in the field after, and it won't contaminate the river because it's going to be composted. So the coliforms are dead. So
Well, that was a question I was going to ask. The compost, is that, I mean, as I said, I grew up on a small farm in Maine, and I remember many a fall day spending coming over on our fields. But anyway, it's good fertilizer. after you've taken the methane out, what is, do you have to, does it lose its fertilization value?
No, it doesn't, it's compost, at the end it's compost, so it's,
But it's heavy.
but
okay.
without the greenhouse gas, you know, you catch it, you use it, you burn it.
It's a
So-
win-win.
So it's really a win-win, and for all those dairy farmers or pork farmers or chicken farmers, they could produce lots of biogas, and you probably need some heat around too. So if there's a farm that is close to the village, I mean, maybe they can heat 10, 20 houses each. So it's a solution, also an alternative to oil. Also.
Great, yes, sir.
Nicolas, I understand that some Native Americans in the Romaine watershed are also opposed to the project and they're taking some actions against Hydro-Quebec. Can you say a little bit about that, because that's about all I know?
Yeah, if you Google these days about the Innu community, and if you put Innu and Romaine, you're gonna probably read about the blockade they did. It finished last Friday. It lasted 1 week. Hydro-Quebec asked for an injunction to remove the blockade, and the judge agreed, because there's going to be a court, more formal court session, let's say, on the 19th of March. So they were blocking the road because the power line would go over their traditional land, and they never signed any treaty or agreement with Hydro-Quebec. So they are against, and this twice, so there was 2 proposals of Hydro-Quebec negotiated with the chief, and they were submitted to the population, and they twice said no in 2 referendum. So there will have to be other negotiation, or it's going to be a long battle in court, and maybe some more blockades, and there might be some violence. I don't know. They seem to be pretty upset by this power land that is an aggression on their land. So maybe you feel a little bit like that, I don't know. Power line issue. If you want to block the road, I don't know where you're going to block it. You might be blocking the frontier, or you can do
The border.
block the border, or you could do a protest in front of Hydro-Quebec. Just the people I saw in those screenings in New Hampshire, it's going to be hundreds of people, and probably they have friends also who would be interested. So 4 or 5 buses in front of Hydro-Quebec.
Yes, sir, in the green.
Have you, 2 questions, have you shown this movie at all up in Courchesne County? And 2, at the end of the movie it said that construction, I was surprised to see this, the way the movie ended. It said construction that started in May of '09. Could you update us on the status of that, and have they started on just 1 or all 4? Or?
Yeah, okay. It's an easy question. 2 easy questions. Yeah, we went to Coos Country, 1 screening in Colebrook. There was a crowd even bigger than that, and I was impressed. Lots of people had already their T-shirt against Northern Pass. Yeah, orange.
Your T-shirt's better.
Maybe it's more pretty, but I don't know. It's not necessarily better. And for your second question, they started Romaine 2, which is one of the 4 dams. Only Romaine 2 is started. They did about halfway of what they have to do. They're supposed to finish in 2014. It's a very big dam. It's 400 feet high. Just try to imagine if we put a dam in Concord on the Merrimack River, what do we flood? Okay, so it's a big dam. It's huge, and they are supposed to start the second one, Romaine 1, this year in the summertime. And there might be a change of government meanwhile. But the new government would be probably the Parti Québécois, who is not completely opposed to them. They just said that they would return to, remember in the film in '95, there was this consultation and the document called For an Efficient Quebec. They wanted to do integrated planning. The next government of Parti Québécois that came, he canceled all that. So they're not so much, they were not so much willing to do it. But now the chief of Parti Québécois, she said she would return to that. But she said, since we cannot throw the toothpaste back in the tube, we wouldn't stop Romaine project. So personally, I met the chief in a manifestation against shale gas, and I talked to her and I said, there was a representative also of the same party, and I told them, well, the toothpaste is not out of the tube about Romaine 1, 3, and 4. So you can stop them, and you're not going to lose money. You're going to save us lots of money by doing it. And she said, well, we're going to have to talk, to think about it in our caucus. And they never publicly said anything else about energy, green energies and the Romaine project since. So we have collectively, the Quebecers, we have to push them to take engagements. I mean, to be more specific, and we have to push the politician to take, we have to tell them we are against that. So if they want us to vote for them, they have to be against that. That's basically how it works.
Yeah. In the back, standing.
You mentioned another river at the end of the film that Hydro-Quebec is looking at, the dam.
Yeah.
Where's that river in relation to the Romaine, and what's going on with that now?
The source of the Romaine is just beside the source of the Petit Mécatina. They are doing surveys, they are doing the impact assessment right now. And there was two person who said they paddled the Natashquan River. Yeah, these two in 1980. So the Natashquan is just in between the Romaine and the Petit Mécatina. Petit means little in French, but this river is nothing but small. It's just that its name belongs to the Petit Mécatina something. I don't know what the Mécatina is. I think it's an island that is called the Petit Mécatina, and there's another island called Gros Mécatina, which means big. So there's a river of Gros Mécatina and Petit Mécatina. So this river is one of the biggest we have. Out of the 16 biggest river we have, the Petit Mécatina is the 14th, and Romaine was the 16th. So they plan to dam it after 2016. When exactly, we don't know. So they would be starting it while we finish Romaine project. That's what they plan to do.
In the back, please, standing.
Yes, Nicolas, a couple of questions with respect to what's going on with the Romaine River. Who actually either owned or inhabited the land that is soon to be flooded or planned to be flooded? And if there were people that either owned or inhabited that area, did the Quebec government just take that by eminent domain in order to relate it to possibly what's going on here in New Hampshire as well?
Yeah, they used it, this eminent domain rights. I think they give compensation to those who have, nobody has more than a cottage there, fishing or hunting cottage that they go with a float plane or things like that, and there's not many. And it's one of the most difficult rivers you can paddle in Quebec. There's lots of portage, lots of rapids that only kayakers can go down. We portage lots of these rapids. The Innu, they were not using this river on their way down. They were using the Saint Jean River up, and then they were portaging to use the top of Romaine River when they were going far north. So the top of the Romaine is more flat, and this part won't be flooded. The southern part was lots of rapids, and they were not using it. So Hydro-Quebec claims that nobody was really using it, so they're not removing the enjoyment of anybody
bears are using it.
except some canoers and some kayakers. They know they're going to remove a nice this river, but they don't agree that this river was canoeable. You know, they said it's like it's crazy to go there. So they show that it's canoeable, and we met people while we were descending. We were a little slow because we needed to film here and there, and we were passed by other canoers. So but it's feasible. It's feasible, but you need to partage sometimes, of course.
Yeah. Over here. Yes.
I'm really happy to have you three up there from the room to answer our questions. Hydro Quebec has been making a lot of reference to cheap renewable power. And so I'm not sure who wants to field this question, but what I've heard is that you're actually not going to be replacing the dirty coal plants and the dirty forms of energy. In fact, you're competing with natural gas. So you're really not replacing the really dirty sources of energy with hydro. Is that true?
I think Chris would like or
Will
like
or
yeah.
Sure, so the current Northern Pass proposal is structured in a particular way. It's designed to bring power into the regional market for electricity. By that structure, the effect will be reducing our use of natural gas power plants, most of which are supplying more of our energy needs than they used to, and they were generally built fairly recently. They're what are called combined cycle natural gas plants, you may have heard of, and the proposal that is on the table would simply get rid of those. Meanwhile, the proponent of the project, Public Service of New Hampshire, owns a number of coal units, as many of you know, in New Hampshire. And those units aren't going away. In fact, it's the express intention of the proponents of this project that those plants aren't going to be affected at all, which is a very interesting state of affairs because, as you heard in the film, Courchesne says the point of exporting to the United States is so that we can diminish coal use. Well, the way this current project is structured is to avoid that result. So you have natural gas plants, which are about half as polluting as coal plants in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And our recent, you may have seen some reference to it, I hope you have, but if you haven't, Conservation Law Foundation worked with Synapse Energy Economics, which is an energy consulting firm, to figure out what the state of the research was on greenhouse gas emissions from large-scale hydropower, with a special focus on these new reservoirs like the Romaine River Project. And it turns out that there's really not that much of a difference between natural gas plants and these brand new reservoirs. So this entire claim that you've seen that bringing this clean, renewable power into New England will reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, they've thrown out 5 million tons. That number is completely false. It's based on assumption that hydropower has no greenhouse gas emissions. It's in black and white in their reports. And so we're faced with kind of a misinformation campaign about this proposal to import power down.
There also hasn't been a lot of discussion about the price. I mean, you would think that if this energy is so cheap, that one of the major reasons you would export it, or we would import it, is that we'd see a dramatic reduction in our own electric bills. Nobody's suggesting that.
They learned on Seabrook.
Yeah.
Too cheap to meter. Remember that expression?
Yes.
Too cheap to meter.
That's exactly right.
Can you can you confirm, I've lost my train of thought, that actually Hydro-Quebec, the large-scale hydro, actually doesn't count as renewable energy in the state of New Hampshire. It's only this small scale. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, so this doesn't even count as a renewable project for New Hampshire.
No, it doesn't meet our, we have renewable energy goals as a state.
Correct.
The that the utilities have to help satisfy. And although there have been proposals to change the law recently to allow in large-scale hydro, and there's currently discussions going on in Massachusetts, which would be a huge effect because there's so much of that renewable market is reliant on that Massachusetts power market. There would be a big effect if Massachusetts changed the law. There would also be a big effect if New Hampshire changed the law. But currently, large-scale hydro is not renewable, and there's a good reason for it. Renewable energy policy and law is designed to incentivize those technologies that aren't yet completely off the ground and competitive with fossil fuel technologies which have a 100-year head start on them. Large-scale hydropower has a pretty nice head start. It's had hundreds of billions of dollars of subsidies, and it is quite economic. The existing facilities, yes, it's mature. It doesn't need that level of policy support that some of the newer technologies need. And so, sending additional revenues to a company that is making billions and billions of dollars in profits, at least on their books. Maybe not in the long term and not in reality, but...
Well, what they would like to have is a higher price, so then maybe the romaine would be profitable to sell in New England. If you accept, if you change the law, you're going to give a higher price than the market to Hydro-Québec, so maybe then it will be profitable. But the question is also, would you like to develop other source of green energy locally, or you want to import energy while you export your cash?
I think hydro, foreign hydro is sort of like foreign oil. I don't get the advantage of it, but anyway. Yes, sir.
A question about the cost of the power from the Romaine project. It was estimated to be 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Does that cost include only the cost of building and operating the dams, or does it also include the transmission costs?
Transmission in Quebec has two parts because you need to connect the power station to the grid. So this is included. Hydro-Québec will pay, Hydro-Québec production will pay $1.5 billion to connect the power to the grid. But then there's a per kilowatt hour fee for transporting this electricity, which usually we say it's 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour in Quebec. So this has to be added. But it's very complicated because it's the same company who gives money to the other part of the same company. So at 1.5 cents, probably the other part is doing money, is making money.
But if you included the transmission costs, that power would be 11.5 cents per kilowatt hour?
Probably it would be the closest estimation. But Hydro-Québec, since the film was released, they changed the way they calculate the cost per kilowatt hour. So now they say Romaine will produce at 6.4.
So your movie's driving prices down over
In the book, like Christophe said, in the book. So, but it was, this argument was contested by, Jean-Thomas Bernard, the professor of the university, and he wrote, it was a full page in the newspaper in Quebec City, demonstrating that it's this assumption that you can remove this and that and it's 6.4 cents is not true. It's still 9 cents per kilowatt hour at the minimum. It's just that the interest rates are a little lower. The rest doesn't count in the balance. It's just like we remove the tires from the car, it's less expensive, yeah.
Yes, sir, in the front row.
The longer it operates, the cheaper it is per kilowatt hour, because you only have to build the dams once.
Yeah.
So, over what period of time are they calculating this to get the price per kilowatt hour?
When the dams were cheaper, when they were making the dams on the the more easy river to dam, with the biggest flow and the biggest water falls. They were the mortgage was on 50 years. Now it's on 100 years. So a dam usually requires major renovation after 60 years. Like the dams on Manic River were built in the 60s. They need to be refurbished. Yeah, that's it. So there's big cost after 50, 60, 70 years. So to put the mortgage on 100 years is quite risky. That's the only way they can try to put it down, so now it's 100 year. But the power line won't even last for 100 years if they wanted to
Well,
export.
presumably other forms of power will get cheaper and cheaper over the next 100 years.
Yeah.
One might hope.
Any questions for Will or Christophe so that we can get some maybe more local action going?
Yeah.
I'm interested in hearing more about the deregulation that they're talking, that people are trying to have happen here in New Hampshire so that more alternative of the biomass plants or whatever will have more of an ability to participate in the market.
Is that what PSNH is opposed to, you mean?
Yeah, oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So Will or Christophe, do you want to?
Go for it.
Sure.
All yours.
It's a good question because there's been predictably some misinformation about this as well. The divestiture bill, there's a divestiture bill pending in the New Hampshire House. It would compel PSNH to sell its generation. As a point of comparison, PSNH is really the only utility in New England outside of Vermont. Well, Vermont's a real special case. I won't really talk too much about Vermont. But most of the New England grid, the generators, are private companies. They produce power at the best cost they can, and they sell it into the market through best arrangement that they can get. And they're not guaranteed a profit. PSNH is guaranteed a profit. They own their power plants, and what they do is they go to the Public Utilities Commission and say, here's what it costs to operate our facilities, here's the fixed costs, here's the cost for our fuel, here's a book value for all our properties. We get a 9% return on all of that. It's a good business if you could get it. And that's the way the regulated system works. They get those, it doesn't matter whether they sell power to their customers or not.
It's guaranteed?
It's a guarantee.
How did this happen?
And so what we're seeing now is that the market is turning very strongly against coal-fired power plants, especially coal-fired power plants like PSNH's, which are from the 1950s and 1960s. It's like running, as my colleague Jonathan Perez, who heads our Clean Energy and Climate program, often makes the analogy to a 50s automobile. That's what we're running in Portsmouth at Schiller, a 50s automobile. Because it's so uneconomic right now, Schiller will only operate 25% of this year. So 75% of the year, we're paying PSNH to operate that facility, and we're paying PSNH to buy power from the rest of the market to meet our needs. And it has become a really untenable situation. It's led almost 90% of large customers to leave PSNH. And so that saddles residential and small business customers with all those costs.
Right. Their rates go up.
Their rates go up. So we're looking at, if the scrubber at Merrimack goes into service, we're looking at a 15 to 20% premium that PSNH ratepayers will pay. And that premium right now will subsidize new Northeast Utilities profits. Doesn't seem like a really good subsidy to me to have coal-fired power get that benefit from ratepayers. Doesn't seem like a logical energy policy. So we're CLF's in support of the the effort to think about this. There are a lot of details that need to be worked out because PSNH is entitled to some type of recovery for its costs of investments in these facilities. And those need to be figured out.
Narrowed down.
Yeah, and narrowed down, and they should be limited to the extent they have made unwise decisions with their investments. And once you figure all that out, you can figure out what's in the economic interest of ratepayers. And our strong belief is that if you do the analysis, it makes sense for PSNH to follow the lead of the rest of the market in New England and divest, become a utility that deals with the lines, the distribution lines, and provides reliable service to customers without playing in this power plant business, which it's doing a very poor job at right now.
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
In Quebec, it's a monopoly. You cannot buy electricity to anyone else than Hydro-Quebec. So, you said that the big industry, they can change their provider?
Yes.
Can the people change provider of electricity? And try to buy it in Vermont or I don't know where it would produce more with biogas or wind energy?
Well, there are options that are becoming more available. The market has taken a while to mature for smaller customers, but there is an option through resident power right now they're collecting customers in blocks and buying people. I don't know. Jim Monahan is here, and he is a utility expert as well in this area. And do you know of any other company, Jim? I mention resident power all the time. And is there any other company right now offering,
Ratepayers an alternative?
Yeah, in a very limited sense. There's a couple of large users who said we're going to buy less expensive power, but you have to make it available to our employees as well. So they've creeped into the market. But as you referenced, PSNH's rates are about to jump up. April Fool's Day, as a matter of fact. And that differential is probably about 20% now. When it goes up to 25 or 30%, there are, my understanding is, companies that are doing business in Massachusetts that are very eager to cross the border. So I'd expect by summer or fall, there'll be a lot more options for residential ratepayers.
Yes, sir.
A question for Will. The Northern Pass PSNH propaganda peddlers have tried to roast you on earlier statements about importing power from Hydro-Quebec. Can you explain that a little bit further?
Yeah, I think the short story is that I served with a number of, I think, 25 or 26 people on Governor Lynch's climate change task force. And one of the recommendations, there were 67 recommendations of the final report, one of the recommendations was to study the feasibility of the concept of bringing power from Canada, which of course we already do. And I think the President of Public Service Company took me to task by suggesting that how can we, on the one hand, support the concept and oppose the method by which they propose to bring the electricity to market. And the only response I could give was that the end doesn't justify the means. And I honestly think that if you go up to 40,000 feet, you start asking the question about what is the best way for society over time to provide the most efficient and the most cost-effective electricity, not just the spot market in the next 6 months, but long term. I think that I'm not an advocate of Hydro-Quebec or an opponent of Hydro-Quebec, but I think if you ask all the right questions and you make a determination that there's a potential for that power to be in the mix, then I think you have to acknowledge that there may be a benefit long-term to this electricity, particularly if the alternative is using more and more fossil fuels. Now, I don't know how I'm not smart enough to ask all the right questions, let alone to answer them. But I think as a society, we can't be afraid of asking the questions. We may not like the answers. I mean, after watching Nicolas' movie, I mean, I don't know how anybody could rationally support the idea of doing what they're doing to the Romaine River, or for that matter, what they've done to a lot of the other rivers that feed into James Bay. It just makes, you know, as somebody who's concerned about natural resources, it doesn't make sense. But, I mean, you know, I also am a believer that the environmental community can't just say no to everything. So there have to be some things that we say yes to. And I'm not suggesting that we should say yes to this. I'm only suggesting that before we take it off the table, we ought to make certain that there isn't some potential benefit. Now, having said all that, stringing 180 miles of power lines down the middle of the state of New Hampshire is the absolute worst thing, at least in our opinion, that you could do to get this power to market. Doesn't mean that there might not be other ways of getting it to market. And I think we need to ask the questions.
Can I follow up on that
Sure.
for a second? Will makes a really good point about asking the right questions. And one of the most important questions that this film raises, at least for CLF, is that the impacts in Canada are relevant to the decision.
Mm-hmm.
Where the power is coming from is relevant. It's not just a black box, that it's not sunshine and light coming down from Canada. There are real costs to this power source. And one of the things we're fighting for very strongly is that the Department of Energy, which has to consider whether to grant the permit for Northern Pass to come across the border, that the impacts in Canada are relevant to the environmental impact of the project as a whole and as to whether it's in the public interest. We're fighting that fight. Northern Pass has said no, impacts in Canada are irrelevant. And unfortunately, the Department of Energy appears poised to make that same decision. Maybe because it's easier to write the documents, I don't know. It kind of goes outside of the standard, let's approve the project mentality, which unfortunately we have in the regulatory system. So we're going to be fighting very hard to consider the issues raised by this film, to ask the questions that Will's talking about before we make such a big choice. And we're actually going to be doing an action alert in the next few weeks, if you agree with us, that will allow people to comment directly to the Department of Energy on this issue. We hope that you'll join us in doing that, and I'll take this opportunity to send this around the room while there are still
Sure,
people here,
yes,
if we don't
please.
mind. This is
How about just a couple more questions? Tom in the back?
Has there ever been a study done in the state of how much energy could actually be saved? How much of the energy that's being produced and used, how much of it could be saved?
You know,
Has there ever been a study anywhere?
Through home efficiency, you mean, or
Home
anyway,
office,
everything?
Factories,
Okay.
everywhere.
One of the questions that ought to be asked in this whole process, from the standpoint of consumers in New Hampshire and New England, you know, the promoters of the project are fond of saying that the ratepayers won't pay for this power line. Well, we would pay for it through the prices we pay for the electricity. We wouldn't pay for it up front, like is traditionally the case, but we would pay for it. And I think there's a fair question about, if this power line, which they say is going to cost $1.2 billion, imagine if society could invest $1.2 billion in energy conservation and save more than 1,200 megawatts, which is what we'd be bringing down. Wouldn't that be a smart thing? Wouldn't it be smart to at least ask the question and answer it? And I think there's, to Christophe's point just a second ago, there are a lot of opportunities to replace the electricity that is now being generated by fossil fuels. And, you know, somehow we have to get off this notion that these mega projects, mega generating facilities are the best way to do it. You know, I think there's potential for doing a lot of just like we talk about local agriculture. Local energy makes a lot of sense. Produce what you need where you need it, rather than, you know, 500 or 600 miles north in Canada and build these humongous power lines to bring it to market. I mean,
Don't you think Wall Street is doing this too? I mean, Hydro-Quebec isn't using their own money to build these dams. They're going to Wall Street and people are investing in it. And in the past, utilities have been a big investment for people is a high return on investments. I know a lot of people who own Bangor Hydro, and that's one is, as far as a small generating company, it pays high returns. So Wall Street is out there taking money, and they want big projects like this that they can dump their money in and get a high return on.
I don't know if there's, I'm not aware if there's other investors beside Hydro-Quebec on the Northern Pass and PH. I'm not aware of that. You ask what percentage we could save. Hydro-Quebec is very, very, very conservative on the potential. And when you saw about 20 minutes in the film, the potential that was 23 terawatt-hour, that's 3 times Romaine project, potential of electricity saving in Quebec, they are the most conservative. Usually what we hear from the expert and the environmental group is more around 30% that would be energy saving. The Deputy Secretary of Energy of New York was talking about 30% energy efficiency and 15% green energy development. So that's the goal. That's their 6-year goal. So it's more like 30%. So that's a lot of electricity. If the peak demand of New Hampshire went down 30%, it would mean 660 megawatts. So that's quite a lot of energy and electricity. And that's what you will have to do in the next 40, 50 years to be much more efficient if you don't want to be forced to develop too much wind towers and too much, you might not have enough biogas to power all the province, and you might not have enough biomass to do enough wood pellets for all the state without, going to a point where it ruins the forest. So you have to have a good building code to force the companies to have a high efficiency level for everything they produce. It should be with high efficiency equipment.
Right. One last question in the back row.
Thank you.
Yes.
2 questions. Number one, what is the current electricity portfolio in Quebec? Is it 100% hydro, or is there other stuff thrown in there? And then secondly, can you just talk a little bit about the citizen environmental movement in Quebec, and how is that coming together in any way around the Romaine project, and was that a galvanizing thing, or what's the kind of current state of the environmental movement in Quebec?
Okay, so our portfolio for electricity is around 96% hydro, and we are building wind towers right now. In 2015, we're going to have 3,200 megawatt. Right now, we have 1,200. So they are putting them right now. So the next 3-4 years are going to be really fast. They've been starting the production 5 years ago. So we're going to have probably like 94% hydro and 6% something else. We might shut down the nuclear power station. There's a debate in Quebec about that. It's at the end of its life right now. So lots of environmentalists want it to be shut down because we have surpluses of electricity. There's probably about 1% gas production, electricity that comes from gas, and some oil also, but in insulated areas like in northern Quebec where there's Inuit villages or town. Your other question was about the citizen movement. I feel that the movements in Quebec that are well funded are those who are in education. They try to teach you to use, make a shorter shower, to use your bicycle instead of your car when you can, use the public transportation and things like that. The groups like you saw in the film, you saw Rivers Foundation, Roy is the president, and it's a lot of his fans that finance the foundation. They don't receive any money from the government, and it's quite difficult to do the the crowdfunding. Alliance Romaine, you saw Steve and Fran, it's a very, very small group, and one of their spokesperson was with the INU last week, supporting them. They are very small. They want to. Their website is allianceromaine.org. If you want to look there, it's a bilingual site. I think they're mostly Anglophones. So the group that have more money, they are often government-funded groups, and like a group called Équiterre, and they don't contest so much the government choices. So that's something I don't like to see too much, because it's like if they have a little conflict of interest. The money is there, so we're gonna promote that, and we're gonna forget the rest. We cannot pay any employees doing that. And the crowd is, the Quebecers were not so prone to giving to these organizations. But I'm sorry about that.
I think in the interest of time, we'll wrap it up, but usually the panelists stay after, so please ask them if you have questions relevant, you just want to talk to them. I'm sure you guys are going to stick around a little as well. A couple of things. Is voting tomorrow in a lot of towns? Okay, so I think on the ballot there are some issues regarding Northern Pass, so please go out and vote if tomorrow's your day. And again, thank you for coming. Free bumper stickers out there. Please look at the table to the left and get the information to the two co-sponsors, please. And Nicolas, thank you very much. And thank you for coming.